identifiable suspects who could have murdered Della, including her violent boyfriend. A month into the trial, lead prosecutor Miss Henry suddenly stepped down from the case, claiming health problems. She dropped this case into the lap of very inexperienced Marcy McDaniel. Carrie Brady, yet another inexperienced attorney, stepped in to assist her. Neither of these women had ever prosecuted a homicide before, and they both admitted that they were in way over their heads. This case suffered serious problems before Henry quit, but once she was gone, the inexperience of these two prosecutors only highlighted the claims by the defense, insisting the prosecution brought the case to trial before they thoroughly investigated it. After 2.5 months of testimony, it only took the jury a week to deliberate and return with a verdict. They found Joshua Wade not guilty on all counts except for tampering with evidence, and for this offense he received a 6.5-year prison sentence, minus the time he's already served. So in 2004, Joshua Wade was released from jail. The Anchorage law enforcement officials feared they had just unleashed a ticking time bomb. By 2007, Wade had just completed his probation in the Brown case when he moved next door to 52-year-old Mindy Schloss. Mindy was a nurse psychologist. She was starting a new chapter in her life. She had recently signed a lease for an office in Anchorage. She was going to start her own practice and become her own boss. This would have been a major benefit to the citizens of Fairbanks because people with her expertise, after all, are very rare in Alaska. At this time, Wade lived at 6902 Cuddy Sark Road, the house right next door to Mindy. He spent his time watching her, and in his mind, he was living intimately with her, fostering a sexual rage and waiting to take that intimacy to the next deadly level. His bedroom window allowed him to watch Mindy in the kitchen, and as a result, Wade watched her going about her daily routine as his life would spin ever more wildly out of control. On Friday, August 3rd, 2007, Wade and his housemates threw a party. This was at the end of a long, difficult week for Wade. He had a few combative exchanges with his supervisors and walked off the job. The day of the party, Wade arrived at his job only to be sent home for his aggressive behavior. Mindy was home on this night, and she was working late. She signed out of her email around 1:30 a.m. and shut down her computer and then went to sleep. Not long after, Wade snuck into her home. He subdued her and painfully bound her arms with plastic zip ties commonly used by law enforcement. With Mindy immobilized, he returned to his house to grab his Glock. He returned to abduct Mindy in her own vehicle. They stopped at several locations, including at least one ATM where Wade withdrew cash from her checking account. Afterwards, Wade drove Mindy nearly an hour away to Wasilla, Alaska, where he forced her to march into the woods, where he executed her. On August 7, 2007, Kathy Hodges, a nurse in Fairbanks, called the Anchorage Police Department to report her friend, Mindy, missing. When Mindy did not return to Fairbanks in time for her shift there, her friend and colleague became concerned. Police entered her home in Anchorage, but to them, nothing seemed amiss. However, when they spoke to her friend, they realized that something was wrong, and Mindy had mysteriously disappeared. There were dirty dishes and papers on her counter. One of her friends told police that Mindy liked a tidy house and would always leave it neat before she would leave for her shifts in Fairbanks. Also, Mindy always placed a check on the kitchen counter for the lady who cleaned her house. Mindy always took a cab to the airport when flying up to Fairbanks for work, so it was suspicious when her car was not in the garage. When police canvassed the neighborhood, a neighbor reported hearing a woman's screams in the early morning hours of August 4th. Another witness saw a small red car matching the general description of the victim's car was in the parking lot of the bank, and they heard a woman's voice in the same area screaming loudly. Unfortunately, though, this was not reported the night of. Anchorage Police Detective Pam Pernaud called Mindy's bank to see if there had been any unusual activity with Mindy's account. The bank official told her someone had made an ATM withdrawal of $500 on Sunday, August 5th at 5:01 a.m. Mindy's friends were certain that she would not be making a withdrawal so early in the morning. Not only that, she rarely used her ATM card. Detective Pernaud requested FBI assistance in obtaining information about the withdrawals. They soon retrieved video of the person who made the withdrawal from the account in the early morning of Sunday, August 5th, 2007. All they could tell from the video was that the person who withdrew the money was a man wearing a blue and white bandana tied around his face and a dark baseball cap pulled low onto his forehead. In the grainy ATM footage, the man briefly pulled down the bandana for 3 or 4 frames, but the camera only caught a shot of his chin. The FBI was also able to learn that at 4:16 a.m. the following morning, the same individual entered another ATM kiosk and withdrew an additional $500 from her account. He took the cash, but left the kiosk before retrieving the card from the machine. When he returned to the kiosk a few minutes later, the machine had swallowed the card, a safety measure implemented by the bank to ensure forgotten cards would not be stolen. Police asked Mindy's friends if they recognized the Caucasian man in the ATM video, but they said they had no idea who this man was. Detective Pernaud returned to the neighborhood and talked to Mindy's neighbors. No one had seen Mindy for several days, but nearly everyone mentioned the rowdy young people who lived next door to her. The neighbors complained about the young men who drank, smoked, and threw loud parties, sometimes lasting all night long. The detective attempted to contact these noisy neighbors, but she couldn't find anyone at home for the first several times she went to their house. Mindy's missing red 2000 Acura Integra was found in the parking lot of a building next to the airport. Her purse and wallet lay on the back seat of the car, and in the trunk, detectives found a suitcase containing rumpled clothes and Mindy's laptop computer. Not long after Detective Pernaud discovered the car, she learned from the 2 teenagers staying in the house next to Mindy that an ex-convict by the name of Joshua Wade had rented the room. After learning this, police officials had a feeling about what happened to Mindy. FBI agents used bloodhounds to help with the investigation. They took 2 hounds, one at a time, to the first ATM where the suspect used Mindy's card. They had each dog sniff the scent from the driver's seat of Mindy's car and let the dogs sniff the area around the ATM to see if the dogs would follow the scent trail. Each dog separately led detectives from the ATM to a door of the house where Joshua Wade was living. The agents then took the dogs to the second ATM where Mindy's card was used. The first ATM was close to Mindy's house, but the second ATM was located 5 miles from her home. Even at the furthest ATM, though, the dogs picked up the scent trail and led investigators back to Wade's house. Pernaud had been skeptical about using the scent dogs, but she watched in amazement. Actually, I'm just going to cross that out. Pernaud obtained a search warrant, and police searched the house where Josh lived. They found a jacket resembling the jacket in the ATM video. In the pocket of that jacket, they found an ATM receipt for $500. Police also found a gold watch hidden in a closet, and when they showed it to Mindy's friends, they confirmed it was her watch. Remember that chin shot the ATM cameras were able to capture? Well, they showed it to Wade's past girlfriend, and she was able to identify him from it. A friend of Wade handed over his phone to the police. They found a photo showing Wade holding a .45 caliber Glock pistol. Police assumed that this was the weapon he had used to murder Mindy. They also found Mindy's PIN number saved on his phone. Alaska does not have the death penalty, but because bank fraud is a federal crime, the federal government could pursue the death penalty against Wade if authorities could prove the bank fraud was related to the murder of Mindy. Nearly a month after she disappeared, Mindy's body was found in an undeveloped neighborhood in Wasilla. She had been shot once in the back of the head and left in a heavily wooded area. After a standoff with police, Wade finally surrendered. He admitted to killing Mindy and said he walked her into the woods, told her to kneel down, and then shot her. Wade made a deal to avoid the death penalty. He not only admitted to Mindy's murder, but he also confessed that he killed Della Brown. Joshua Wade was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole in 2009. And 5 years into his sentence, he claimed that he was being mistreated in the Alaskan prison, so he struck a deal for a transfer to a federal prison in Indiana. For his part of the deal, he admitted to the murders of 3 men in Anchorage, one of which he committed when he was just 14 years old. He's not admitting to whether or not he killed the other women he admitted to before when he bragged about murdering Della. And 3 of those Alaskan Native women whose murders were featured in the 2000 Anchorage Daily News article remain unsolved. So we might never know if Wade had anything to do with their deaths. Friends of Wade claim that he had often voiced his hatred for Alaskan Natives, but no one has confirmed if that has anything to do with his choice of murder victims. I mean, Mindy wasn't an Alaskan Native, but Della was. Joshua Wade is an angry man, incapable of controlling his temper. Even in prison, he has been transferred several times and is now housed at a maximum security federal penitentiary in Wayward, Pennsylvania, where he spends most of his time in solitary. Prison officials classify Wade as one of the most assaultive, predatory, riotous, and seriously destructive prisoners. So now about the men that Wade is admitting to murdering. Wade took responsibility for the deaths of 38-year-old John Michael Martin in 1994 when Wade was just 14, and 30-year-old Henry Ongtawazruk. That's the best you're going to get from me, guys. I don't know. That is a very hard name. So he admitted to killing this guy, Henry, in 1999. Both men were mentally ill. Wade also confessed to killing an unidentified man the same night he murdered Della Brown. So in May of 1984, John Michael Martin was found dead from a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. His body was next to a bike trail that runs along Northern Lights Boulevard. He had just left the Village Inn restaurant nearby when he was killed. Martin was a regular at the Village Inn for at least 5 years. He often came in during the daytime and evening to have coffee with friends. The night his body was spotted by a passing motorist, there had been no indication that he was upset or that anyone around him was upset. He left the restaurant to walk home around 2:30 a.m. His body was discovered about a half hour later. Martin was unemployed, but he was not homeless. He